Hello everyone and welcome to this video that's going to talk you through English Language Paper 1 Question 3, and we're going to be going over what you need to do, what you might want to include in an answer. This is one of the questions that we see students struggle with year in, year out when it comes to English language. So we're going to look at this as a key question. We're going to go through how to plan an answer, and then obviously we'll give you time at the end to write an answer. So remember, Language Paper 1 Question 3 is always worth 8 marks. You can see there. That means you should spend about 10 minutes writing your answer to this question. It will always say you now need to think about the whole of the source. Sometimes it might give you an extract. You know, it might give you this focus on lines, this to the end. But normally it's the whole of the source because it's looking at structure and how the text fits together from beginning, middle and end. This text we're going to look at today is from the beginning of a short story. You might get, the middle, you might get the end, but by and large you might get a short story in its entirety, but it'll probably be an extract from somewhere. And the question will always say, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Now, what that question actually means is, what's the writer done to make the reader interested? We're not really interested in your personal opinion. It doesn't say, do you like this source and why do you like it or not like it? It is asking you, what has this writer done to make it interesting to you as a reader? And clearly, some of you might be watching this video, you might be reading this question thinking, well, it hasn't done anything, I'm not interested in it at all, I'm just doing it to get my GCSE. But of course, you need to approach this question as if you have, as if you are interested in it as well, or just give the writer credit for what they've done there. When we come to this question, you might want to rewrite it. You could, indeed, you should write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. A couple of things to help you with this question. What this really means, what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source. So you'll always get these 3 bullet points. So that means you have to discuss the beginning, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops. Changing in focus counts as terminology for this question. So I tend to put it this way. If you were going to turn the extract or whatever you've got into a film, what would you actually want to focus on in that film that you're making? From paragraph to paragraph, and that will probably help you. But change in focus counts as terminology for this question as the source develops, which is kind of your middle and your end, really. And then any other structural features that interest you. I know some people will be interested in structure and can analyse it. Just so we're clear, structure for this means things like flashback. It means flash forward, so going kind of forwards to the future, which happens quite rarely. It means things like a circular narrative as well. It does not mean sentences. So it's not short and long sentences. That's question 2. I know structure in poetry, when we're analysing literature, structure can include things like the line length, it can include rhyme, it can include all sorts. Structure really, for Language Paper 1 Question 3, we are looking at what's at the beginning, what's in the middle, what's at the end, and why is it there? What quotation and why? Why has the writer decided to put this at the beginning? Why has he decided to put it in the middle? Why has he decided to put it at the end? And you can pick up 1 or 2 marks quite easily. And what we tend to see a lot is things like to make the reader read on. To make the reader want to read on. I'm going to let you into a little secret. The books that I read, when I'm reading these books, I don't tend to think, I've read that bit. I'll read on. I'll read a little bit more. I read the book because I'm interested in the concept. I've bothered to pick this book off the shelf. So actually, I'm not just thinking, I'm reading that bit because that last bit was interesting. I know what people are trying to say, but a lot of students write that. And what we need you to do is be specific. Be specific about what is at the beginning, what's at the middle, what's at the end, and why has a writer put it there. And to that end, look in specific detail at characters and settings. Look at people who are at the beginning or middle or end and why they're there, or one character and how they change as they go through. Feelings might be, or emotion might be a good one. And setting, if there's a dangerous setting there but a happy setting there, look at those as well. So I'm going to pause there, just get you to think about, we're focusing on the beginning, middle and end of this extract. And then what we're going to do in a minute, just make sure you've got all those notes to answer the question. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start reading through a source. So we've gone through, we've looked at the question, we know we're focusing beginning, middle and end, what we focus on. Now what we need to do is apply that to a source. This source is from a trial exam you've probably done. It's an extract, we call it the Rosabelle paper. It's an extract from the beginning of a short story by Catherine Mansfield. It's the early 1900s, and Rosabelle, a lower class girl who works in a hat shop, is on her way home. Clearly, we are probably going to be looking in some sense at this girl called Rosabelle and why we focus on her and how she's feeling. The question asks us specifically to focus on what we focus on at the beginning of the source and why do we focus on that. So let's have a little look. At the corner of Oxford Circus, Rosabelle bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had so little tea. So straight away we've got this character called Rosabelle who's had little tea. For a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa are not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop. So she had a scone, a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa, and not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop, and probably not after a hard day's teaching either. As she swung onto the step of the bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Rosabelle thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. Something hot and strong and filling. Right, if this is our beginning, and bear in mind we've got 15 minutes reading time at the start of this paper, this is what I'm looking at for question 3. At the beginning of this extract, Rosabelle is presented as starving. They're my quotations. She's had so little tea. She had a scone, a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa. She'd have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. Why she's presented that way, I don't know, because I've only read this bit so far. As the source develops, it might be kind of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. She might kind of land on a miraculous supply of food. She might go hungry for the rest of the source. So we don't fully know why. But clearly at the moment, we're starting to empathise. We're showing empathy for her character. We as a reader want to be invested in her character. We know that she's starving. I know why people might want to be saying, we want to read on to find out if she gets something to eat. I'm not too sure about that. At the moment, I just feel sorry for her. I feel empathy for her because she hasn't got enough to eat. And we know how difficult that feels as well. And we also know, looking at the context box at the top, she's a lower class girl. So maybe she is going to struggle to find food. And that is me being specific. I'm not saying, we want to read on to see if she gets, something else to eat. We're saying, actually, we feel empathy for her character at the start, because we see her struggle to find food. As the source develops, so we're kind of looking for the middle. The middle can be anywhere, really. There's no such thing as, line 10 is the middle. It doesn't really matter, but let's see what happens as we go through. Rosabelle looked out the windows. The street was blurred and misty, but light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver, and the jeweller's shops seen through this were fairy palaces. Her feet were horribly wet, and she knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black greasy mud. There was a sickening smell of warm humanity. It seemed to be oozing out of everybody in the bus, and everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. Rosabelle stirred suddenly and unfastened the 2 top buttons of her coat. She felt almost stifled. Through her half-closed eyes, the whole row of people on the opposite seat seemed to resolve into one meaningless, staring face. Bear in mind, I'll have probably done this bit for question 2. So I'm talking about the conditions in the coach. I can use these for question 3. I've got some nice things here about as the source develops, we change in focus to the conditions in the carriage. And they are unpleasant. And we are probably going to further empathise with her character, because not only is she now starving, she's in this kind of bus, she's in this kind of carriage bus here, and she's stuck with loads of people, and there's a sickening smell. So not only is she starving, she's in these disgusting conditions. So I empathise with her here, but I'm kind of looking for something else really, because I've kind of made that point in my beginning paragraph already. She began to think of all that had happened during the day. Would she ever forget that awful woman in the grey Macintosh, or the girl who had tried on every hat in the shop and then said she would call in tomorrow and decide definitely? Rosabelle could not help smiling. The excuse was worn so thin. But there had been one other. So we're starting to see a bit of a shift here in focus. We've got away from her misery and we've got a shift in focus. There had been one other, signified by this but. A girl with beautiful red hair and white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold they got from Paris last week. She's got beautiful red hair, white skin and eyes. Rosabelle had seen her carriage at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man and so well dressed. What is it exactly that I want, Harry, she had said, as Rosabelle took the pins out of her hat, untied her veil and gave her a hand mirror. You must have a black hat, he had answered. A black hat with a feather that goes right round it and then round your neck and ties in a bow under your chin, and a decent-sized feather. The girl glanced at Rosabelle laughingly. Have you any hats like that? It's hard to know if that laughing is mocking Rosabelle or mocking this specific hat that she's got to find. But here we go. They had been very hard to please. So now as we go to the middle, we've got this sense of a kind of shift in focus to focus on the girl with beautiful red hair. This is almost a kind of a daydream in the middle of this source from Rosabelle to escape, escape her conditions. Rather than thinking about how starving she is at the start. So we've got the hunger in the carriage. So I'm not saying here, notice, I'm not saying, we want to read on to see what happens with this girl. I'm saying here, well, actually, this is in the middle because it's like Rosabelle is daydreaming, reflecting what had happened in the day to escape the difficult conditions of the carriage and how hungry she is. And she's focusing on the appearance of this girl, or Mansfield, the author, focused on the appearance of this girl as a means of escapism. Escapism in the middle from the conditions here as well. Oh, one moment, madam. I think I can perhaps show you something that will please you better. This is Rosabelle speaking here at the bottom. She had run up breathlessly, cut the cord, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat, rather large, soft, with a great curled feather and a black velvet rose, nothing else. They had been charmed. The girl had put it on and then handed it to Rosabelle. Let me see how it looks on you, she said. So we're approaching the end of the source now. Rosabelle turned to the mirror and placed it on her brown hair, then faced them. Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable? The girl cried. I must have that. She smiled again at Rosabelle, so we've got this girl being pleasant. It suits you beautifully. A sudden, and this is our end, a sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. She longed to throw the lovely, perishable thing in the girl's face and bent over the hat, flushing. It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam, she said. The girl swept out to her carriage and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you, Rosabelle heard her say. So, the end, we focus on the inequality and Rosabelle's anger. We focus on the sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger. She's angry because of the comment. Suits you beautifully. Because Rosabelle can't afford food, but the girl can afford an expensive hat. So we see how we focus on how unfair Rosabelle's life is. So what we've done is we looked at the beginning, middle and end. We focused on the beginning about how we start to empathise with Rosabelle. We see she's struggling to find food. She's struggling to eat. In the middle, she reflects back at what's happened earlier in the day. We now know that although the girl has been quite nice to her, it's quite negative, but initially this is a daydream to escape the conditions. She's replaying this episode in her mind. And then by the end, we focus on the inequality. The sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. So what I'm going to do is just pause the video at this point and get you just to think about what we focus on the beginning, what we focus on the middle, what we focus on the end. And you would need 1 or 2 quotations for each section. Okay, so now what we're going to do is start putting it together. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to write a beginning paragraph, and then I'd like you to have a go at a middle and an end one as well. I've started to write this paragraph here, and I've kind of got my point and my evidence. I've just started to introduce my evidence, and I'm just going to talk you through the next stages for this question. So, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? We've gone through, we found the beginning, middle and end. Mansfield is the name of the writer. You can use the writer, but, call her by her name. Mansfield focuses our attention on how Rosabelle is clearly starving at the beginning of the extract. So I've made a point where I'm focusing what the writer does at the start. Well, we show how she's starving. I need a quotation. Now, I'm not analysing this quotation. I'm not picking out words. It's not language analysis. I'm just using the quotation to explore what is at the start. She had so little for tea at the start. Shows she can barely afford to eat. Rosabelle being from a lower class reflects her struggle to find food. So now what I've done is I've said what is at the start, and I've used a quotation to support that. Now I need to explain why that is at the start, and this is the bit that we struggle with sometimes. So the reason this is at the start is, what you can do is include this way. So perhaps Mansfield, I suppose the point is we don't know. I'm never going to speak to Catherine Mansfield, so I'm never going to find out from her, but that's the whole point. If we're being specific about it, or we use that qualifying, perhaps Mansfield, we think about why it's at the start, being specific, not just saying, it's at the start to make the reader want to read on to see if she finds some food. Perhaps Mansfield has placed Rosabelle's, and she mentions a good quote, a desire where she sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, or she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. Rosabelle's urge to sacrifice her soul for a good dinner. I've paraphrased that quotation, so I've not used the exact quotation. I put in single quotation marks. Perhaps Mansfield has placed Rosabelle's urge to sacrifice her soul for a good dinner at the beginning of the extract, so that we as a reader can empathise with her suffering and struggle to find food. As Rosabelle, so thinking about why else might this help? As Rosabelle is hungry, let's use a quotation again. As she is, she's starving. As she has kind of had little tea. As Rosabelle is suffering from having little tea. And this is where I'm going to start thinking about how beginning leads to middle. So the next bit we see is the carriage. It makes, or the bus, the conditions on the bus more unbearable. So what I've done there, what's at the start? Well, at the start we focus on how she's starving. Quotations used, but remember I'm not analysing words from that. It's not language paper 1 question 2. I've done that already. I'm not analysing sentence length. That's question 2 as well. So I'm talking about how, what's at the start? Well, she's starving. Why is that at the start? Well, it's at the start so we can empathise with her suffering and struggle to find food. She's suffering from having little tea, so it makes the conditions on the bus, the bits that's coming next, more unbearable. And what you need to do is you need to have a go at writing a beginning, middle, and end paragraph in the 10 minutes you've got. What I would say, some of you will struggle to do that. So if you know, for instance, I think the end is quite important. So if you know actually the beginning and the end, it tells you to focus on the beginning and the question, so focus on the beginning, or it says you can do that. You might talk about the beginning and the end if you've only got time to do two. Or if you think there's a particularly good moment in the middle, you might focus on that. So in your 10 minutes, what you're going to do now is have a go at writing up an answer. Can't do beginning, middle and end if you can. And explore and make sure you're being specific about why the writer does that at the start. We establish a sense of character of Rosabelle. We see that she's starving. There's no phrases like it makes the reader want to read on, but we do talk about being able to empathise with her character. And so have a go at that, and hopefully that will help you when it comes to doing question 3 in the exam on language paper 1 and getting to grips with structure and what is at the beginning, middle and end of a source.